Hi everybody, welcome back. I thought today I would do another book review because it's been like literally years since the last time I did a book review. The book today, by the way, is called Raven Girl. It's by Audrey Niffenegger. I figured this would be appropriate for LouisTheRavenheart. Audrey Niffenegger is one of my favorite authors these days. She's written a couple of my favorite books. The Time Traveler's Wife, you've probably heard of it. It was a really famous book and a really famous movie. And also her Fearful Symmetry, which I read last year. She's got like that fairy tale for adults fantasy thing going on, kind of in the same vein as Neil Gaiman. Those two are friends. They kind of exist in the same community of writers, I believe. Well, I want to talk about Raven Girl. As you can see, it has a very interesting. It has a girl who inhabits the body of a raven. That's not really what the book is about, but it's kind of the symbolism on the front cover. As I said, this is an illustrated book. So there are illustrations like, like macabre kind of illustrations like this. Audrey Niffenegger is the illustrator for her own books, so she's also an artist as well. It's hard to track down this book too, like none of the bookstores had it, so I had to order it from Amazon. Basically the story behind this book is that an opera company, the Royal Opera Company of London, approached Audrey Niffenegger for like to give them like a premise for a ballet. Eventually she also made like the prints of the pictures in the book. It's a short book. It's an illustrated. It almost reads like a children's bedtime story kind of thing. The premise of the book is there's this lonely postman. It takes place in like the countryside of England, I believe. And this lonely postman lives like near London or somewhere near a city, but he can see the city in the distance, and he's far off in like the countryside, and his lonely little house in the middle of nowhere. He has a little garden. Sounds like my kind of place to live, to be honest. He's just this postman who goes about his, daily routine. He's pretty complacent with it. You can tell he's a little bit lonely. So one day at the post office they give him this address he's never heard of before, and he's heard of every address because he's been doing this for years. But it's this new address, he's never heard of it. He gets to the address and it's like on the side of this cliff somewhere with like a raven's nest. And he's like, where do I drop off this letter? And he sees a little baby raven on the ground, that fell out of the nest. And it's this little raven. It's like this little raven who looks up at him with wide eyes. And there's the silhouette of the postman. And he takes her home, little baby raven, and he raises her. It's sort of like a daughter, sort of like a pet, whatever. Not really like a daughter. That would be kind of disturbing because he falls in love with the raven. You heard that right. Yeah, but they fall in love, as things tend to be. And that's kind of what makes the premise of the story strange. You don't know, it doesn't go into detail as to how the raven and the postman conceive their child, but they do have a child. And that child is the Raven Girl, and she's part raven, part girl. She hatches out of an egg. She is like breaking her way out of the egg without like a beak, so she's having trouble getting out of the shell. But she tries to fly. She thinks she basically has like the sort of the mind. She thinks like a human, but she also thinks like a raven. She thinks she should be able to fly. And she can only call and squawk, and she can't talk. So she can talk to her mother, but not her father. She like grows up, goes to college. There's a boy in her class who's kind of like creepily obsessed with her, and that becomes part of the story. There's all kinds of really cool art, symbolic art of like her being part raven, part human. But at college, they have a guest speaker come to the class where she's at. It's like a biology class, and he talks about, this is where it kind of gets sci-fi, because Audrey Niffenegger does get very sci-fi a lot of the time. It's like this mutation thing where they combine like animal parts with humans and make them into like the next level of species on this earth kind of thing. And there's the doctor, and the Raven Girl's really interested. She's like, can you make me into a bird? Can you make me into a raven? Well, they try to experiment, and here's a picture of her with raven wings. I'm not going to tell you whether or not that's like that's her vision of herself, or whether whether the doctor actually succeeds. But because I like to keep these reviews spoiler free. they're kind of like playing God, if you will. So there's a little bit of that ethical dilemma going on there. The book kind of is just very matter of fact with it. Kind of just assumes that, oh yeah, of course they have this scientific technology that we've never heard of going on. And I won't show you any more of the pictures later in the book because, well, it'll spoil it. Things happen, you know, with her life in college, with the people she meets there, with the doctor, with her family, the postman and the raven, and we see how they all react to her wanting to change herself into a raven, and the question is, like, will she accept herself for who she is? Will she be more inclined to accept what she's supposed to be? Doesn't this all stem from like a union that isn't natural between the postman and the raven? I do think that this book, there's this undertone, this theme, this very pertinent theme to today's culture about like identity. Maybe it parallels gender identity or racial identity to some extent, which I think is really cool if that's what Audrey Niffenegger had in mind. I think she did have something in mind like that, about like just the universal theme that who we picture ourselves to be in our minds and isn't always what we look like to the world. So I think it really does tackle those issues in a very simple, intuitive way that you don't have to like overthink, and it kind of disconnects it from as uncomfortable as thinking of a raven and a human getting together like that can be. It might be more comfortable to use that kind of fable for some of the things people really wrestle with. It would be interesting to see the version of it where it's just a ballet and people just tell the story through movement and dance, especially when you can put the bird, you know, move like a bird in the body of a human, which is necessary for this story and for a lot of ballets, for like Swan Lake, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. It's a quick read. I would even say, if you want to read it to your kids, if you have kids and they're innocent and they don't think of like the technicalities behind how this raven girl would have been born, you could read it to them. The only reason why a story like this is not innocent is because adults who know too much read it. When you're young, you might just take the stories for just as simply as you would if you were a child and be like, oh, that was cute, that was sweet, that is just a fairy tale. So that's all I've got. Have a pleasant summer. It's like the second day of summer now, and get outside, enjoy the chirping of the birds.